Hey YouTube, Texasound here, Austin, Texas. Today what we're going to do is restore a pair of Bose 901 Series 3. What we got to do to start with is get this grill off here, which is stapled on. And the staples are the same color as the grill cloth, and about 1/8 of an inch across. They're hard to see. And they're hard to get out without damaging the grill or the cloth or the cabinet. So I'm going to show you how I do this. Bright light always helps. If you can't see the staples, and there's usually 6, each corner and then one in the middle here. If you can't see the staples, get yourself a magnet. Move it around. There you go. See, it'll find the staple for you. There's one there. See, right there. Alright, so that's our 3 staples. What I'm going to use is an awl. And what I'm going to do is first, I'm going to get it right up against the staple and make sure I'm not catching any of the cloth here. I'm going to push it tight against the staple. And I'm going to go straight down. Tap of the hammer a couple of times there to get it under the crown of the staple. Then I'm going to turn my awl to the side, completely drive it up under the staple. Now get yourself something to use as a little fulcrum here, and then get the crown of the staple up. Make sure you haven't caught any of the cloth. Push the cloth weave down around the staple so you don't mess that up, and then pull the staple out just like that. Alright, like I said, if you can't see them, use your magnet. There it is right there. Once again, we're going to get right up next to it. We're going to tap in a couple times here. And then we're going to turn the awl on its side. Drive in under the staple and lift the staple. Then we're going to push all the cloth down around it. Then we're going to put our fulcrum in here and pry the staple out, just like that. Alright, now we've got all 6 staples removed, and we're going to take our awl again, and we're just going to get up under the corner of the grill and just lift that up like that, where you can get a hold with your fingers, and then just lift the grill off. Type of utility knife, whichever type you want to use. I've got this one. I kind of cut the blade down a little bit so to make it to where I can get in here and work on these bows. But as you can see, there's a little bit of the foam here left on the frame. We're just going to come in under there like that with your knife. Sometimes you got to turn it on edge. There's a little glue overrun there, and get that part right there up. We've got a little piece of the foam falls down in here. We get some tweezers, maybe get a hold of it, or we can take our canned air, blow it out like that. Make sure none of it goes down in there. If you lose a real small piece down there, no big deal, but we want to basically get that off the edge. Okay, now we've got to get the cone, and you got to be, you have to be careful here. The cones they're somewhat delicate. You don't want to slip with your knife, and you don't want to ruin the strength of the cone here. But what you got to do is get down here, and you don't want your knife to be real sharp either, because you're going to slice right through the paper if you've got a sharp blade. So what we do is we get down here with our blade, and there again, this is real dry, so this comes off easy. As I said, some of these go the other way. Instead of turning into powder like this, they turn into a gooey, sticky mess, and they're a lot harder to get off. Alright, now we've scraped all the dry suspension remains off there. Now you get yourself a brush, a nylon brush, a metal brush, to finish the removal. You've got to get all this dust off here, otherwise the glue just won't adhere. Got to get that surface right. Be gentle, you don't want to damage this cone. work your way around until you've got all that suspension material off there. And again, we come back with the canned air. Now, some of these do-it-yourself kits that you'll find on the internet will tell you you don't have to remove the dust cap to center the assembly with shims. They'll say, no, you can put this on without removing the dust cap. I don't recommend that you try that. Alright, sometimes we use an intentionally dull knife so we don't accidentally cut into the cone. When we're going to cut the dust cap here, we want to have a really sharp knife. We used to cut the dust cap entirely off and then shim it, and then when we're done we would put a new dust cap on. But this is a method I use nowadays. Instead of removing the entire cap, you want to come in from the edge about a millimeter, and you want to watch out for the lead wires here. You want to stay away from those. And then what we'll do, we'll come in about a millimeter to avoid the aluminum voice coil form, and we'll just make a cut along here about 3/8 of an inch or so. You're going to come over here the other side of the lead and then follow the shape of the form. And then here on the other side we'll make a third cut. Alright. Now we've got some shim material that's already been prepared. It's a plastic material. It's pretty thin. The voice coil gap in here is pretty narrow, so I think you'll have to have, I wouldn't say it's paper thin, but it's pretty thin plastic. And what I'm going to do is insert this into this slit I've cut in the dust cap, and then it's going to go right in between the voice coil form and the pole piece. It's kind of a touch thing. You can feel it. Sometimes you might hit the top of the pole piece, and instead of going in the gap, it'll curl. You know, you can feel that. But if it's biased, if it's curved slightly, then put the curve to where the tip of the shim will actually go into the gap. See, and a lot of times the third one, it's a little tight, so I'm just lifting the cone up and tilting it over a little bit so I can get that third shim in. Now we've got 3 shims in, evenly spaced, and our voice coil gap is exactly centered. I would recommend that if you get a kit, if you try to do this yourself, that you get a kit that has the yellow rubber cement, as opposed to the white glue, the water-based glue that some of these companies, that some of these kits have. The white glue, it's really difficult to do this and do this right with the white glue. It's water-based. It has very low tack characteristics and a very long open time. You're going to have a lot of problem if you use the white glue. It takes quite a bit of practice with the white glue to deal with the drying time, the open time, the tack characteristics. You have to put the glue on both surfaces. You have to let it sit for quite a while until it gets tacky enough to where you can actually work the suspension down. But with the rubber cement, you have a lot higher tack characteristics, and you have a much shorter open time. So what we do, now that we're shimmed, we're all cleaned up here. Alright, now we've got all the old suspension removed. The surface is ready to go. We've got our 3 shims in, centering up the assembly. And the shims not only center up the assembly here, but it helps hold it in place. When you don't cut the cap, when you don't shim, then the cone easily moves away from you, and as you try to put the new suspension on, when you're pushing on it, the cone's constantly walking away from you. So that makes unstable, and when you've got an unstable cone and you're using the white glue with the low tack and the long open time, you're going to have a hard time. It's not going to be easy. So we're going to use the rubber cement. So we'll invert it. If you want to do a pretty job, make sure your glue tip's always clean and clear, so you don't make a mess of things. So we come in here, and the Bose makes it easy here because it's the little V shape makes a nice little pocket for the adhesive. We don't want to get too close to the edge. I mean, we want to be right up on the edge, but we don't want a lot of glue out here on the edge because it's going to look kind of tacky when you get that overrun. I use the nozzle of the glue bottle, but most of these kits come with either cotton swabs or brushes. So you could put this adhesive on with a cotton swab or a brush. There again, if it's the first time you've ever done this, you don't have any practice with that swab or that brush to get this adhesive on. And it is adhesive, so it's kind of sticky. You can make a real sticky mess. Alright, so we've got adhesive on the suspension part. Now we're going to set it aside. We're going to come back, and following the old suspension as a guide, we're going to come around and we're going to put a layer of our rubber cement right here on the edge of the cone. And not too thick, because you've already got glue on the suspension, so don't need a whole lot on the cone. Alright, so we've got the cone. Now we come around to the suspension landing here on the speaker frame, and we go around. You try to get it even all the way around. There again, you don't want to make a big mess here. Probably bead a couple millimeters wide. About like that. Now see, this glue has a short open time. It's already starting to tack up. You don't want to wait on this step. Like on the white glue, you're going to have to wait quite a while before you can put this on, because it's not going to tack up. Drop it on as close to being centered as you can. It's never going to be perfectly centered, because they're never perfectly centered when they manufacture these drivers to begin with. So, but there again, with the little V groove here, it almost sets itself. You can follow, you can feel the suspension as it drops over the edge of the cone. So we get that on. Now we're going to push this down a little bit, push the cone down a little bit. It'll find its own center with the shims. Now we need a small tool to push the suspension down onto the frame. I use this brush right here, but any kind of small screwdriver or small tool, get that in there. This just happens to be just the right size to fit in there. There again, if you're doing this with the white glue, you're going to be working this a long time. As you can see, the rubber cement starts to set up and tack up pretty quickly. Always keep in mind when you're working the suspension down that this assembly has to be centered. And even though we've got shims in here to center it up, you have to be careful that when you put the suspension down, when the glue starts to set, that you're not tugging it off center one way or the other. So always be thinking about being symmetrical here in this application. Notice we don't have a lot of glue overrun here. You know, if you get glue overrun, if you put too much and you get the glue and it's kind of ugly, it's not going to really hurt the sound of it at all, or the performance. But you know, you want to do pretty work if you can. And there again, especially with the white glue, don't walk away from this until you're done. You don't want the suspension will lift up and then that part of it won't be, and it'll dry, the adhesive will dry, and then you're going to have a botched job. Got to have an airtight seal when this is all said and done. Every part of the suspension has to be down and glued in place. You can't have any gaps in the adhesive, or you'll have air blowing up, trying to escape through that suspension and causing a lot of problems. Eventually there it lays down, and what we'll do when the glue dries is we'll pull these shims out, and then we'll use just a little bit of the white water-based glue to seal those slits back up. I've got a little bit of a needle type applicator on this glue bottle, make it a little bit more accurate. And then what I'm going to do is just come back in here on these slits and just seal them back up like that. Here again, you could put that on with a brush. You could put that on with a cotton swab if you want to, or you can put it on like I just did, and if you want to pretty it up, come back in with a little brush and just, you know, just make sure it's sealed up that slit. There again, you don't want air moving through there. But it doesn't take much here, just a little bit. Now that'll dry clear. And that's how you do the one in the front. We'll show you next the other side, the back, where you have 8 more of these drivers. Alright, after the glue's dried, you made sure the suspension was all the way down. We pulled our shims and we put a little dab of glue to seal the slits that we put in the dust cap. And now we're ready to do the back side. Now the back grill's a lot easier to get off than the front. There's no staples involved. They just use this sticky glue, and the side fits into a slot. So you want to pull it here in the middle to bring the side out of the slot, and then lift that up, pull that away just like that. See, here's the little sticky pads they use to hold the grill on, and you can see these aren't very sticky any longer. And on some of the models, they didn't have this little sticky pad. They had just a stick of this, just a glob of this, like spirit gum or some other sticky substance. So you could use some type of putty or some type of sticky substance, or you could glue pieces of Velcro onto the grill and then onto these little posts to when you go to reinstall the grill. Alright, let's put that off to the side. Now it's the same drill on this side as on the front. On the back side here, only it's ×8. Where we showed you how to do the one driver on the front, these drivers all go the same way. The same procedure. You have to remove the old foam. And once again, you get lucky. This is one of the ones that's dry. The dry ones are so much easier to do. Some of them just turn into a goo, and it takes a lot of work to get that gooey suspension material off there. Same way on the edge here. It's just like a powder. Remember, you have to get that really clean or the new glue won't stick. So after you scrape it with your dull knife, don't use a sharp blade there, it'll cut into the cone. So after you scrape it, then you come back with a brush. Make sure you've got it all the way down, and then some canned air. Cut your 3 slits in the dust cap, put your shims in, apply the new suspension just like we showed you on the front. You know, you do them 4 at a time. If you got something like a block of, say, polystyrene like this, you lift that up, put that under there, or tilt it up here, get a little bit higher. Now it's kind of flat, so it's going to be a lot easier to work when you've got it lifted up like that. And that's really the only thing you have to, like I say, these drivers, you do them just like we showed you on the front, and do them 4 at a time. When your suspension is laid and the glue is completely dry, then you pull your shims, you put a little dab of glue over each one of those slits to seal that back up.
Start.
Alright, now we've got all 8 of the drivers on the back side with the new foam suspensions applied. With the 2 here, we're going to pull the shims out. Alright, now the little slits we've cut in the dust caps to center the voice coils with shims. Now we're going to have to put a little compound, a little glue over those to seal those up airtight. So before we do that, we've got the 4 on this side. I've already done the 4 here. We're going to carefully move it to make sure that we actually got it centered and there's no rubbing. So that's all good. One other step before we seal these slits up. Sometimes when the shims go in, they spread the slits apart a little bit. These all look good. We want both sides to be in contact so that when we put the compound on, there's no chance any of it's going to go down into the gap there. So that's all good. Got a little application tip on this one that helps me out. This is a water-based latex compound, and we just put a little bit on each one of these slits, and then you can use a Q-tip or a brush to smooth this out, or if you wanted to make it look make it, you know, nicer, you could just go completely all the way around like we'll do on this one. Of course, once we put the grills on, you don't see this anyway, but we like to do pretty work. Alright, so like I said, we can take, in this case, we'll just use a little brush here. Remember, anytime you're using a brush to water-based, to be sure you get the water off of it. But then we can just go along here and just smooth this out. Make sure the gap is, the little slit we've cut is completely sealed up airtight. Yeah, like this, and I put it all the way around just so you come all the way around, and when that dries, we'll be ready to go. Okay, now we've sealed over the slits that we cut in the dust caps to put our shims in. Tested all 8 drivers, and they all move smoothly and freely in the gap with no rubbing. So all we have to do now is put our grill assembly back on. Get the sides down in these slots, and then push down on all the posts so the sticky posts will grab a hold of the grill. I'll turn it over and put the grill on the front side. You can use some small brads or some small screws to reattach it, or a stapler if you have it. You have to have a pretty stout stapler because this front baffle here is pretty hard. So I use little brads. I'll put one in each corner. And there you have it. Restored pair of Series 3 Bose 901s.